I'm your host, Jenni Turpin, and today I'm delighted to introduce you to Gavin Andrews, Managing Director of HeartMath in the UK and Ireland. Gavin discovered the powerful benefits of HeartMath coherence and heart-based living 17 years ago during a difficult period in his life. Since then, he's found joy, meaning, and purpose in sharing the science and practice of coherence and biofeedback with others. And today, Gavin is going to be talking about heart-brain coherence. Put your heart into living pain-free. Welcome, Gavin.
Jenni, thank you very much. Lovely introduction. And thank you so much for inviting me as well. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, delighted to have you here. Very excited about our chat. Do you want to start by sharing a little bit about your story and how you got to be doing what you're doing today, please?
Yes, okay. Well, be the short version. We'll be here forever. So I'd just like to say I didn't invent HeartMath or anything like that. So I look after HeartMath here in the UK and Ireland. But HeartMath originated in the US in California in the early 90s. But yeah, I look at it after it over here. I actually came to HeartMath in a quite difficult time in my life. I had in my early 30s, and I actually lost my first wife to breast cancer. So I was, experienced a very stressful event, and an event that, kind of woke me up in many ways as to realizing who I wasn't, but I wasn't really sure who I was. Anyway, the short story is that I actually discovered HeartMath while I was doing an MBA. I decided to leave my previous career behind, went back to university to do an MBA, give myself something to focus on while I was grieving. And I got really interested in the whole idea of leadership, and particularly self-leadership. And from the perspective of kind of working out who you are for how you can lead your own life. So that was going on, as well as dealing with a very stressful experience and grief. And HeartMath popped up one day in a lecture that I went to about the physiology of leadership. And I was just fascinated. I've been studying things like emotional intelligence and self-regulation and stress management, etc. And none of the stuff that I learned about could I do, basically. I knew all about emotional intelligence, but I couldn't actually do it. And anyway, so I saw this presentation, and I saw a demonstration on some technology that showed how you could regulate your own physiology, and then also put your brain in a better place to kind of think more logically and rationally, and regulate your thoughts and behaviors, etc. So I was fascinated, hooked right from that point, and I decided to start adopting the techniques, and I bought some of the technology that existed back then, and found very quickly that it worked for me. So I was finding myself much less stressed, much less frequently. I was even finding that I was getting kind of fewer colds, and I used to do a lot of sort of triathlon training. I was getting fewer aches and pains as a result of my training. So it worked for me. And from then I basically got more involved with the organization in the US. And then one day they said, would you like to be the guy that represents HeartMath in the UK and Ireland? So that's how I got to where I am today, basically, the short story. It's something that I practice, I do it every day myself, and I'm lucky enough that now it's part of my work as well.
Thanks so much for sharing. And I think you were very lucky to find it. You said 17 years ago, yeah?
Yeah.
I found out about 2 years ago because I'm a QEC trauma therapist, and in QEC we talk about heart breathing. And I looked more into HeartMath, and I particularly wanted to get you on because I think there's a lot of people who don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe if we start from there, can you explain what is HeartMath? What does it mean?
Okay, well, basically, so in simple terms, HeartMath is just a way to be the best version of yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, and I also venture kind of spiritually or existentially. So that's the simple side of it. It's actually a system, and it's a system that includes some aspects of breathwork, a particular type of breathwork that we call coherence breathwork. It includes also what we call interoception, so actually focusing on and in the heart, specifically that part of your body, but also sort of metaphorically focusing on your heart in terms of who you really are, and what you want, what's important to you, how you should live your life. There's a part of the system that's about emotional self-regulation, so recognizing that we do have some control over our emotions. They're not just reactions. We can choose to feel things like gratitude or appreciation or love or joy. And then the bit that we're probably most famous for is technology. So there's a gadget. It looks a bit like this, but basically is measuring your heart rhythms. And so what we're able to do is to measure this state that we call coherence, which means that you can then practice it. You get validation that you're doing it, and that you can get better at it. So you can learn, you can practice, you can get better over time, and you can track your progress. So for people that like technology, that's a great additional part of the system. But it's actually the techniques, it's the breathwork techniques, the focusing and the emotional self-regulation techniques that are the important part. That's what makes the difference. The technology doesn't do anything to you. It just gives you feedback on what you're doing to yourself to enable you to get better at that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And like you say, the technology is there for people who want to add that to their practice, and it can be useful for feedback. I just want to go back to, you talked about coherence, and you talk about heart rate variability coherence. What is that for anyone who's never heard of it before?
So all of us, let's say that differently. None of us have a heart that's like a metronome. So none of us have a heart that's beating very, very steadily. If you had a heart rate of 60 beats a minute, it would not be beating once every second. That's an average. So we all have this variability. The heart speeds up and it slows down. So heart rate variability is basically the beat to beat variability in your heart. So you can calculate that. You can work out what your heart's rhythm is. So that's another way of thinking about HRV. It's your heart's rhythm. HRV coherence is a kind of another aspect of HRV, whereby you are intentionally putting your heart's rhythms into a state where they're progressively speeding up and slowing down. So they're actually creating oscillations. I've got a handy little diagram. Basically, this bottom diagram here is we are all able to intentionally put ourselves into a state where we can control our heart rhythms, and they speed up and slow down in these oscillations. And something very special happens when you do that. In essence, what's happening is the heart is the largest rhythm maker in the body, and it's sending this lovely, ordered, stable information to the rest of the body, particularly the brain. And so everything else synchronizes with that and basically goes into this optimal state where everything becomes much more efficient and effective. So that happens physiologically, and in terms of your brain as well. If you were stressed or you're experiencing a lot of pain, you can shift the activity from the stress centers, change the information flow to the pain centers, and begin to get the activity back into the prefrontal cortex, where you can be, much more self-aware, and you've got a much better opportunity to self-regulate. So the coherence bit, lots of people have heard of HRV. They might have sports watches and things that measure it. That's great, but that's literally just giving you a measure of how much variability you've got at that point in time, or at the end of the day, or overnight, or something like that. That's useful. I'd say, and I would say this because I'm Mr. HeartMath, but I'd say that actually being able to measure that in real time and intentionally change your heart rate variability to what we know as an optimal state takes things a bit further, and there's additional benefits of that, both in the moment, but also over long term in terms of your health and also your happiness.
So you talked about optimal state. How does someone change their heart to optimal state? For a start, how do they know if they're not in optimal state, and how do they change it?
Well, basically, you're not in an optimal state if you were feeling unpleasant feelings and emotions. That's not to say that we should try and avoid them, because we shouldn't. But if you're feeling, anxious, worried, frustrated, if you're in pain, basically, if you're feeling things that don't actually require a fight or flight response or a freeze response, then for most of what we're experiencing in the world, a fight, flight, freeze response is not particularly useful. Great if someone's going to attack you. No good if you're trying to work out, how to pay a bill or suffering with pain. So yeah, that's really how you would be feeling unpleasant feelings and emotions. And in terms of how you might change that, we intentionally, through our breathing, first of all, we can shift to a state where we can get ourselves out of that fight, flight, freeze response. So in simple terms, what's happening is when you create these ordered rhythms, these oscillations, in effect, the brain perceives that as that order and that stability as safety. And so one of the things that happens is that the stress centers begin to deactivate and the cortex comes online. In pain, what's happening, and we know this from lots of people who tell us they're able to modulate their pain, both their long-term pain like angina or joint pain or back pain or whatever, and also even in the moment pain if you stubbed your toe or bashed your elbow or something like that. What's happening is you are increasing the vagal activity. So by increasing the activity in the vagus, you're influencing the pain receptors in the brain. And as most people probably know, the more stressed you are, the more intensely, acutely you're going to feel your pain. But if you can change the nature of the signals and you can increase that vagal activity or increase parasympathetic activity, pain perception is often reduced. So there's lots and lots of research that shows that. There are other ways of doing that, aside from HeartMath, but what we know is that very quickly, by changing your heart rhythms, putting them into this coherent state, you've got an opportunity to modulate your pain.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I saw an image in I've got a book on a HeartMath book, and it shows an image of the electromagnetic field generated by the heart, which is fascinating because it extends, it covers the whole body, but it extends outwards for quite a distance, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, we all emit an electromagnetic field. That's real. We had expensive bit of kit called a squid magnetometer. We could measure it. So I'm not talking about imaginary fields or auras and things like that. Yes, we all emit an electromagnetic field, and so that's one of the forms of information. So the heart is sending lots of different information and signals throughout the body and to the brain. One of those signals is electromagnetic. So dependent upon the nature of our heart's rhythms, we're emitting different electromagnetic field activity. It could be chaotic, which is going to sustain stress reaction, increase pain perception, or could be coherent. But actually the heart also, if you think about what it's doing, every time it beats, it creates a pressure wave. So if it's beating erratically, it's going to create an erratic pressure wave. Well, the body and the brain is going to perceive that. The heart's also part of the endocrine system. It's releasing hormones, and depending on your emotional state, it's going to release different hormones. So if you're highly stressed, you're going to be, for sure, you're going to be releasing stress hormones, but the heart's not going to be releasing oxytocin. But if you were feeling care, love, compassion, your heart could be releasing oxytocin, which would then buffer the stress response and could also, again, reduce pain perception. So there's all this different information that is going from the heart to the brain, which gives you, and we can control that, so that therefore gives you an opportunity to intervene and at least manage your pain response and your stress response.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating that, and I think a lot of people don't think of this. So anyone who's tuning in, who's in pain or who's in stress, the heart can actually help reduce pain, can't it?
It can, yeah, because you can control it intentionally. And in fact, if you've got heart pain, these types of techniques can be very beneficial. We train cardiologists, and they'll sing the praises of people who are able to control their heart rhythms, because actually, even if you've got heart problems, these types of techniques can be protective. But for sure, the heart and the brain are inseparable. We tend to think in the West, don't we, about different parts, and we like to chop things up and we focus only on the brain or on that. Human beings are systems. The systems can work chaotically and kind of antagonistically and not very well together, or they can work what we call coherently, together as a whole. And that really is what you're able to do by influencing the heart and the autonomic nervous system. You can get everything else to sync up with it and work much more effectively together.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people relate that if you're stressed or anxious, you don't feel great. And often one of the first things, you feel breathing in your upper chest, you feel your heart going. I'd like to talk a bit more about gratitude and appreciation, because that makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
It does. Unfortunately, as human beings, we tend to place our focus on what we don't want and what we want to avoid and what's difficult. And that was probably very useful in our evolutionary history, kept us alive and got humanity to where we are today. But actually, it doesn't serve us very well for most people in their modern lives. So we have this, negativity bias. But if we're aware of it, we have an opportunity to overcome it. So particularly, we find that placing our attention or awareness on things that we're grateful for, or if we can't necessarily be grateful for something, at least for things that we appreciate, that we could appreciate even in a difficult circumstance, that there is a learning from it, or that we'll come out of it stronger, or that, there could be some positive. So it's not always possible to be grateful for everything that's going on, but we can perhaps be appreciative. But also, to place our attention on things that we care for, or people that we love. And you know what, we can do that throughout the day. I mean, I could sit here and focus on the grim weather. It's looking pretty grey and drizzly outside. Yeah, oh bloody hell, I don't really want to go outside today. It's pretty grim. Maybe I won't go for my run. Or I could look out at my neighbour's Indian bean tree, which has still got some beans on it, and amazingly, there's some green parakeets sitting in it. They love to eat the Indian beans. So I can choose to place my attention on that instead, and sort of marvel at how these tropical birds have ended up in my neighbour's tree, and how amazing that is. And so it doesn't need to be anything significant. It's just about recognizing you've got some choice as to where you place your attention. Where we place our attention is influencing our emotions. And actually, at the end of the day, in terms of quality of life, our quality of life is measured by what we are feeling. Yes, that might also be influenced by our financial position or other things like that. But ultimately, quality of life is based upon how you are feeling, and essentially the ratio of kind of pleasant to unpleasant feelings, of which we do have some control over that ratio. We can place attention and awareness on positive things. Not to say that we can avoid the negative, not healthy even to do that, but we do have some opportunity to have more emotional choice in our lives.
Yeah, and I think your example was really good, because we were discussing it earlier. You're in the UK, I'm in France. I'm looking out the window. It's grey and drizzly, and I'm a fellow Brit. We tend to talk a lot about the weather, and it's raining.
Of course.
But as you said, you can change your focus really quickly. And I looked out the window this morning, and there was a beautiful red sky. It was just beautiful. And I think what happens as well. And you'll tell me if this is right. When you start noticing things like, your green parakeets, I still remember that red sky from this morning, and it brings a smile to my face. And then you start looking for other things, don't you, that are going to bring you that feeling of appreciation. And it can be tiny little things, can't it? It doesn't have to be anything big.
No, it doesn't. But if you think about it, each moment we're experiencing an emotion. A lot of times we're not aware of it, but we are experiencing an emotion. The more that we become aware, the more we have some choice. So we can notice ourselves looking out the window, getting, oh, blimey, now look at that weather again. It's terrible. It's fine. You don't need to worry about that. But if we recognize, oh, I'm doing it again, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to place my attention somewhere else and celebrate that. So it doesn't need to be a big deal. We can do it very quickly. And actually, as you say, the more that we do it, the more it becomes like a muscle that we're strengthening. And the easier it is to do it, the more frequently we'll do it, the more we'll notice. And so that really is how you're changing the ratios of your emotional experience. Now, the emotions are important because we also know that whilst you can get yourself into coherence through just breathing, actually most people will naturally go into coherence when they are feeling a feeling like the gratitude or appreciation or love. It happens to everybody. The challenge is if you don't have those feelings very frequently. But we can exercise it. We can experience them more frequently. So if we do, naturally our bodies are going to go back into balance. If we're feeling those positive feelings, pleasant feelings and emotions, we're going to experience less pain. But even when we're not feeling them, if we notice, we can intentionally do it. So it becomes a sort of, the more often you practice it, it becomes more sort of unconscious that you're placing your attention and awareness on the positive. And then when you're not, you're much more likely to then notice it and say to yourself, is there any value really in me placing my attention and focus on this negative stuff? Or have I done enough of it now? Shall I switch it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, I noted down awareness and choice, and that's words that are coming up with lots of the speakers on this. It's this whole thing about actually we can take back a lot of power, can't we? We tend to, a lot of the time when we're in pain, when we're stressed, we look for someone else to give us a pill or give us a solution. And what you're saying, is that actually there's a lot of things you can do just by slowing down, becoming aware, and particularly tuning into your emotions. And often behind those emotions is a thought, isn't there? There's quite often
there is
thought behind that, and that you have this choice that you can decide whether to carry on with that negative thought that's creating that negative emotion, or to switch it.
Definitely, definitely. And I think also what's interesting, you're talking about kind of people expecting someone else to solve the problem, give them a pill or something like that. Some interesting new technologies coming out that are based upon influencing the vagus nerve. They will kind of zap your vagus nerve or stimulate your vagus nerve through vibrations. And I think sometimes those technologies can be very useful, but actually the reality is we can control our own vagus nerve and achieve the same ends. So, with no side effects other than, positive ones, basically. So we do have some choice. We don't have to rely on an external cure. Yes, those things can be useful, but at least as a kind of adjunctive treatment, also learn that the way you breathe has a powerful impact on your ability to modulate pain, and the way that you feel does as well. And that actually it's the feeling side of things that is going to improve quality of life.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make, because it's not something we're taught at school, is it, to look out for your feelings? It's really not something that we learn. And yet, if we can just tune into our feelings, it tells us so much about what kind of state we're in and whether we've set off that flight response, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then we can then make that choice to do something about it. I'd like to find out more about the role of biofeedback in heart coherence.
So biofeedback, best thought of really as a training aid for all this stuff. So the most important thing is the techniques. So the breath work. Ultimately, if you can't control anything that's going on, more often than not, you can control your breath. So that's kind of the foundation, if you like. If we can control our breath, then we've got more of an opportunity to switch the emotions. The biofeedback really is just showing you how well you're doing that. So, as you know, lots of people are interested in breath work. They're interested in meditation and mindfulness, those types of things. They give it a go. And a lot of the time, unfortunately, people don't stick with it. They give it up. And one of the reasons is because they're not getting any validation as to whether it's working or not. Very often, especially if you've been in a bad way for a while, maybe been a bit depressed or anxious, it can be very difficult to notice any difference in what you're feeling or what your body's doing. So if you're not getting any information, it's very difficult. You're not getting any quick wins. It's very difficult to sustain it. So people give up, then they don't get the benefits. Now, what's interesting with the biofeedback is you don't need to feel anything. It will tell you, it will show you what's happening to your heart rhythms. So the heart rhythms are a window into the autonomic nervous system. They're also a window into the communication between the heart, body, and brain. So that can validate for you that what you're doing is doing something different. And then over time, you can begin to notice that you might make a change in your breathing. You might make it slightly slower or deeper. You might notice that you're making it much smoother. And so you learn that those adjustments can result in a change to what you're seeing on the screen, the biofeedback, the nature of the heart's rhythm. And so we have scores that tell you how coherent you are, and you can see that visually, etc. So then you're getting the validation. You can feel good about yourself at the start, even if you don't notice it or feel it. You've got the validation of, yes, this is working. And then over time, you do then begin to build this awareness, this sort of interoceptive awareness of what's going on. And you'll feel that you are coherent. You'll also notice when you're incoherent, which then gives you an opportunity to stop that and then get coherent again. So really, that's what the biofeedback's all about. It's very simple stuff. It sits on the earlobe. So we've got an ear clip here. What this is doing is it's very clever. It's reading 500 times a second the density of the blood in the capillaries of your earlobe. So it's not electrical. It's optical, but it correlates with ECG very, very well. And so it's basically measuring these gaps in your heartbeats. It's working out the rhythm, and then it sends that data to your phone and visualizes the rhythm. So you're seeing in real time your heart's rhythm, and you're seeing yourself influencing your heart's rhythm through these simple techniques. And then at the end, it gives you your scores and things like that, so you can track that over time. So for people who need some proof and need some validation, for people who like to use technology for these things, like the numbers and stuff like that, it's wonderful. It's a really useful way to build a habit. I use it every day because that's my habit of practice, and I like gadgets. But it's the techniques that are the most important thing. So if you don't like technology and it causes you stress, just practice the techniques. That's what's going to make the real difference.
Yeah, and like you brought up earlier, once you start practicing the techniques, you notice really quickly, don't you, if you're in coherence or not. What would be fantastic, because we've been talking a lot about HeartMath techniques, is if you could share a HeartMath technique and everyone can, play along with you.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have, our techniques are very, very simple. I thought I'd share one actually called Inner Ease, because it's a very useful technique for experiencing pain and tension and things like that. So yeah, I'll just take a few minutes. I'll walk everyone through. So the first thing to do is to just sit nice and comfortably. Make sure that you're feeling as relaxed as you can at this point. So just try and relax the shoulders, relax the body, relax the belly. That's the most important thing, because we want to make sure that we've got full range of movement with the diaphragm. And so we're also going to be ideally breathing in and out through our noses if we can. That's important. If you can't, you breathe in and out through your mouth. That's fine. So the first thing we do is we shift our attention or our awareness into the heart area, or sort of the chest area. It can help to put your hand there. For many people, they find that quite useful just to anchor attention or awareness. Interestingly, there's some research that suggests even putting your hand here can release oxytocin. Certainly feels quite nice if you put your hand there. So we've got our awareness or our attention in our heart, sort of chest area. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start breathing nicely, slowly, more deeply than we normally would. In and out through the nose. And ideally, we're imagining that the breath is also flowing in and flowing out of this heart or chest area. Now, I know that it can't literally flow in and out of your heart. So, we need to make sure that the belly is expanding as we breathe in, contracting as we breathe out. But the idea is just to sort of anchor awareness in that heart or chest area. And then imagining the breath flowing in and then flowing out. And ideally, trying to pick up a nice balanced pace. So for many people, a 10-second breath cycle leads to high levels of coherence. Can be a bit faster, can be a bit slower, all a bit different. But maybe try, so that would be a 5-second for the in-breath, and then a 5-second for the out-breath. And we're just literally keeping that focus there and imagining the breath flowing in, and flowing out. And what this is doing is basically you're taking conscious control of your breath and therefore your autonomic nervous system and therefore your heart's rhythms. So, Jenni, if you were wearing our technology now, what we'd see is your heart rhythms would go into this nice ordered pattern. So this is the first stage. It's just called heart-focused breathing. And so the next stage then that we want to be able to do is on our in-breath, we're just going to imagine breathing in a feeling of ease. So just breathing in this feeling of ease. And then as we're breathing out, feeling that ease flowing throughout the body. Just gently breathe a feeling of ease in with the breath. And then feeling that ease going throughout the body and the mind. Now, as a little tip, if you're struggling a bit to feel that ease, then you might try recalling something or someone that helps you feel that sense of ease. Could be something you do. Could be a certain person you spend time with. Could be your pet. Could be a favorite place. Really doesn't matter what it is. Just sort of try and connect with that as a way to lead yourself into feeling that sense of ease. And then as you continue to breathe, just noticing any other tension as well, and just letting that gently flow away with the ease. So just sit in silence for about 30 seconds more, just doing that. Okay, and then the idea is to sort of, once you've got that sense of ease, just make a commitment that you want to try and sustain that throughout the day, or notice when you come out of that, and as quickly as possible, try and get yourself back into that state again. So Jenny, looks like you're feeling fairly easy there. You've got a nice, relaxed looking on your face. And...
I'm at a standing desk, and I'm thinking I better not kind of keel over backwards. What's really nice, I mean, I do heart breathing, and it's something I use with my clients as well. Just putting your hand on your heart somehow takes you out of your head and into your heart. Like you were saying, just that simple thing. And then starting with the breathing and then bringing up that feeling of ease, it takes you into a different place. And you can, well, I could anyway, I could feel the whole system calming down and dropping downwards, more centered and calmer. And so for anyone tuning in, I would recommend going back through the video and redoing it. And then once you know how to do it, it's really simple, isn't it? You can just have little...
It is, yeah. And I mean, sometimes people struggle to begin with. If you've been in a tough place for a while, you've been in pain for a while, or a bit anxious or depressed, it can be difficult to necessarily switch the emotions straight away. So maybe just kind of stick with the breathing. The other thing you can do is use external cues and prompts. So it might be that you could find a piece of music that, really makes you feel at ease, or you could find some nice holiday photos, or something like, something that you could look at that would take your attention and place your awareness on something that could create that sense of ease for you. So kind of play around with these things, and find something that works for you. We are all different, but don't underestimate the power of the breath in and of itself. It can make a real difference, and science is now only really beginning to understand just how powerful and important breath is. We do have an opportunity to really change things that are going on both physically and mentally for ourselves through just controlling the breath alone.
And I think just to make the point that it's not just the breath, is it? It's that feeling, you just talk about feeling of ease, or that feeling of gratitude or appreciation. When you bring that up together with the breath, that makes a big difference as well. Thanks so much for coming on today, Gavin. Do you have any last words before we wrap up?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. I think I said this already, that, when you really can't control anything else, one thing you do have an opportunity to control is your breath. So that's always worth remembering. The other thing I'd say actually is, as someone who's just really into all of these different techniques and into loads of different gadgets and things like that, trying different things all the time, there is no, in my experience, there's no such thing as a kind of one size fits all cure or silver bullet or anything like that. So I think experimentation, I'm hoping that you give HeartMath a go, it's going to work for you. But there are lots of wonderful tools and techniques out there, and it really can be just a matter of giving them a go and recognizing that you might not find the best solution for you straight away, but keep looking. There's good stuff out there, and there's more and more wonderful techniques and technologies coming out all the time.
Yeah, and I think we often need a combination, don't we? It's not just one.
We do. We need a portfolio of different things. Yeah, we do.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Gavin, for coming on today. Have a fabulous day.